The lock slid home like a decision, and the room went still. She had come alone to Chicago, like so many others, for work at the World's Fair, a short-term job, a bed for a week, a new start. The doctor in the fine hat had offered all that, with a courteous smile and a discount. Now the heavy door sealed, the walls seemed too close, and the air felt thinner by the breath. Somewhere beyond the plaster, a valve turned. She pressed her palm to the knob and felt heat. The window was a wall. Her scream came back to her, dull and small, as if the room had been padded by steel. In the hallway, footsteps paused. Then they moved on. Chicago in 1893 glittered against Lake Michigan, white palaces glowing with electric light, bands and fireworks, crowds that made even empty pockets feel hopeful. A few miles south, where streetcars rattled and the fair's music thinned, a 3-story brick structure rose at 63rd and Wallace in Englewood. Shops occupied the ground floor. Above them, a tangle of hallways and rented rooms promised cheap lodging for travelers and young women seeking work. The proprietor signed the register as Dr. H. H. Holmes. He spoke softly, kept a pharmacist's counter on the corner, and looked like a man you could trust with a prescription. He had precise hands and steady eyes, the sort of man who made worry feel unnecessary. He had been born Herman Webster Mudgett in New Hampshire and studied medicine with more interest in bodies than in healing them. In Chicago, he became a pharmacist, a landlord, a businessman, whatever the moment required. He lied as easily as he breathed, and he fired builders the instant they learned too much. Workmen installed doors that opened onto brick. Staircases rose to blank ceilings. Corridors bent and doubled back. Some rooms were sealed tight like vaults. Others contained small gas jets connected to lines that could be opened from the hallway. Hidden chutes dropped from bedrooms into the cellar. The furnace waiting below burned hot enough to leave almost nothing behind. No single carpenter saw the whole plan. Only Holmes did. The World's Columbian Exposition brought thousands of strangers to the city, and Holmes understood what anonymity could do. He offered jobs to stenographers and shopgirls, lodging to visitors, and romance to those he found vulnerable. He took possession of trunks and wages in the fine print of his contracts. He encouraged secret engagements, then urged women to write home about sudden travel before they disappeared. Many never sent another letter. The hotel held their silence like it held heat, tightly, with purpose. What happened within those walls was reconstructed later from bones, receipts, and a trail of deception. Witnesses could not agree on every detail. Newspapers sold fear by the column inch. But certain facts remained. A steel-lined room with a peephole, door hardware that locked only from the hall, a walk-in vault where a gas line could be opened from the corridor, a chute hidden in a bedroom closet, a cellar furnace large enough to erase a person. In that dim space below, investigators would find scraps of women's clothing, partial skeletons, vertebrae, a child's bones, and surgical instruments black with use. Holmes wore gentility like a well-cut coat. He tipped his hat in the morning and by night tallied the value of a ring or watch in a notebook. He married more than once while earlier vows remained unbroken, each new ceremony conducted under a different name. He bought on credit, vanished when payment came due, and smiled his way to the next signature. The castle made fraud easier and murder convenient. The fair made victims plentiful and forgettable. The crimes that ended him did not begin in Chicago. After the fair's lights went dark, bills closed in, and Holmes drifted. Denver, St. Louis, Philadelphia. With Benjamin Petezel, a handyman and occasional accomplice, he planned to stage a death, collect an insurance payout, and split it. When the moment arrived, Holmes chose simplicity. He killed Petezel, used the real body for the claim, then befriended Petezel's wife. He took custody of 3 of the children and moved from city to city, leaving false addresses and careful notes that made pursuit feel one step too late. Detective Frank Geyer of Philadelphia followed the paper crumbs and lodging house ledgers across the map. In Toronto, he dug up a cellar behind a small house and found the graves of Alice and Nellie Pitzel, wrapped and buried to be forgotten. In Indianapolis, he traced packages and false names to a cottage where evidence suggested Howard had been killed and his body destroyed. By the time the detective closed the ledger, 2 of those children were dead and the 3rd could not be saved. Philadelphia prosecutors charged Holmes with murder. Meanwhile, investigators in Chicago pried open the castle. They found the oddities builders remembered: the crooked passageways, the blind doors, the short staircases. In the basement, they cataloged acid vats, ash, bones likely human, and a kiln-hot furnace. They also found ledger notes and receipts that hinted at one more industry: cleaned skeletons shipped to medical schools for study. Whether Holmes sold many or few, he had the knowledge and the tools to do it. He turned human absence into income. Even in custody, Holmes arranged words like he had arranged corridors. He confessed freely, then recanted. He claimed to be born wicked, then claimed he was framed. He hinted at dozens of murders, perhaps more than 100, numbers that inflated in headlines like carnival balloons. The confirmed victims were fewer than the legend insisted, but the building itself, its intentional design, spoke to scale without counting. You did not need a roll of names to see purpose written in brick and steel. In October 1895, a jury in Philadelphia found him guilty of killing Benjamin Pitzel. He was sentenced to hang. On May 7, 1896, at Moyamensing Prison, Holmes climbed the scaffold wearing a calm expression, as if the end were another business appointment. When the trap dropped, witnesses said his neck failed to break cleanly. He strangled for minutes before the body stilled. At his request, his coffin was set in cement before burial. Protection, he said, from grave robbers. It read like one last calculation: to keep anyone from doing to him what he had done to others. Back in Englewood, the castle burned in a suspicious fire not long after the first searches. Later, the ruin was torn down. A post office stands there now, where the corridors once turned back on themselves. Customers line up with stamped envelopes, feet on clean tile, eyes on the clock. Most do not think about the old blueprints. The wind pulls at the door and people come and go, and nothing about the corner hints at what quiet once sounded like behind a locked door. The story has endured because it collided with America's most optimistic moment, the fair that promised a brighter century, while revealing a darker engineering. Holmes built a machine for control of space, time, breath, and evidence. He was not the first serial killer in the nation, but he became the emblem of a modern kind of predator, educated, mobile, polite, and camouflaged by progress. The castle's power lay not only in the deaths within it, but in how perfectly ordinary it looked from the street. If you walk near 63rd and Wallace, the building you enter is federal and fluorescent, not a maze. Yet it is hard not to imagine the pressure of a narrowing hall, the sudden dead end, the handle that turns only from the outside. In a city dazzled by electric light, a man used walls to make darkness obedient. The fair closed, the crowds moved on, but the lesson stayed. Evil need not announce itself. Sometimes it hangs a shingle, hires a bookkeeper, and smiles as it turns the key. Thank you for listening to The Lantern's Tale. Subscribe for more true stories, if you dare.